Does anyone remember Farscape? Well, apparently a lot of people do, because my DRD has been making cameos in the past few videos, and people have been all like, DRD OMG! Guys, that was just for me. I made that for me. I just really liked Farscape because it was one of the few shows that actually tried to show you aliens, you know? Essentially, an astronaut... Gonna do the intro of this show. Can anyone hear me on my tape recorder? An astronaut in the late 90s gets shot through a wormhole and ends up in, let's just say, for the sake of argument, the Star Wars galaxy, ticks off the Empire, and hijacks a space whale. And that's the whole show. Also, it was shot in Australia, so all the aliens and Imperials have Australian accents. But I digress. The space whale's white blood cells are these little yellow robots that roam around the hallways, fixing stuff, accomplishing various tasks. They're called Diagnostic Repair Drones, or DRDs. They're essentially all-purpose MacGuffin bots. They have all these panels, and the implication is that every single panel has a different tool in it, but only a few of them actually open, so they just sort of do whatever the scene requires. At one point, it's revealed that they can take and print Polaroid photographs. Anyway, I made it out of these materials. If you attempt this, make sure you use safety gear. It's not always apparent because I'm out of frame, usually, hopefully. But all this stuff is poison if it makes its way into your body. First, I build an ovoid internal frame out of floor mats. This will make it easier for me to figure everything out because I'll have a surface to put the skin onto, but I'm gonna end up removing 85 to 90% of it later, which is why I'm using hot glue on this bit, because it's easier to come apart. I'm starting off with an obsolete helmet template I made years ago. I felt more comfortable modifying that one than the one that actually fits my head. I literally just added this 3-inch panel. Then I traced that onto yellow EVA foam. I had this notion that I'd just make the whole thing out of yellow foam and I wouldn't have to paint it, which almost worked, but we'll get to that. Black Sharpie may not have been the best thing to use as a tracing marker in that case, but a lot of the first layer is getting covered up. And also, on the show, there's a lot of black weathering in all the crevices on this thing. I connected the front just to eliminate, you know, a tiny percentage of the seam that I have to glue. In later versions, I'll have to join them in the middle, because I'm absolutely gonna make more of these. One day, I will have my own DRD army! Ideally, or somewhat obsessively, one for every version that appeared on the show. For instance, the very first one we see, Ben Browder's character accidentally damages its eye when his canopy ejects, so he fixes it up with blue painter's tape. That's what NASA sends you into space with, a cassette tape recorder, and blue painter's tape. Only the essentials. Hey, what are you doing, Ben? Clearly he's not a prop maker. Although he does have the best line reads. If I ever see Ben Browder, I just want to yell at him, whoa, 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 man! Bullets! Bounce! I heat formed and bent up the shape I made just the same way that I make the helmets, allowing them to cool inside spent tape rolls. Then I did the other side. Totally ignoring my rule about never aiming the heat gun down. Oh no! And then we start with the contact cement, which is still all happening out of frame. This was like right before I got the new camera mount gear. Thank you, patrons. You'll be scrolling in a moment. This problem happens so often that I use some of the patron money to fix it, which you should see by the end of the video. But because the mail is not instant, we got to deal with this camera angle for a few more minutes. Once the surface of the contact cement had become tacky, I was able to join the sides. See, these seams have to be really strong, and this build had no deadline, which was great. And it's why I'm using contact cement here. I actually have time to wait for it. I reheated my foam after it's been joined just to even out the lumps. This was a puzzle piece section, but I cut it in half, and now it's going to go around the circumference of that. So I've placed this around the perimeter, and that's going to make up the difference. So I've left this open because I think there are little doors there. I methodically applied all the parts of the frame that I built earlier. I know that this is a little bit off-brand for me, but it's the reason that this has no time constraints is purely a personal project. It was just the thing that I wanted to build above all else. I actually found some of my original sketches from the year 2000, from when I was trying to reverse engineer the mechanisms, what I thought the mechanisms were of the DRDs, because it was live and we didn't have TiVo and I hadn't figured out how to work a VCR yet. So I would just sort of like get these snippets of the DRDs on the show and I'd go, okay, there's a tool, but I don't know where the panel is because I don't remember. And I think it's just like an interesting exercise in human memory and how memory works. And I have all these other, I love that there's a taser. There's a taser on it. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, maybe it's better that I didn't have all the best quality tools, because as a kid, didn't have the best judgment. Not necessarily sure that I still do. Yeah, so clearly it would grab, let's say, the house cat and then taser it. God, I was a monster. But I don't know, Farscape isn't too off-brand from Star Wars, right? It's essentially just Australian Star Wars. I weighted down the foam while the glue set up, because if there's too much stress on the seam, it will absolutely come apart while setting. Case in point.
So from that, I got that, which will go in there.
I sound like a Cylon in that shot because I'm wearing a respirator. So the side panels from the old helmet template also had to be extended. And then we go through the heat process again.
Oh, hey. Accidental Weibo tutorial.
Guys, remember Weibo? Remember Spacepot? I remember.
It's easy to get burned.
I attach the sides, and now we get to add all the panels. And those should be heat formed as well, but it's 1/4 inch foam, so it really doesn't have to be heated as much. Good. You know what? Curving it makes it easier to glue.
They say that this stuff has a 20-minute working time. It's really more like 12 to 13, arguably 14. But essentially you spread it on here like I'm doing, and then you have to spread it on the opposite thing that you want to glue it to, so that there's 2 sides of equal surface area.
I glued that on. You have to be careful when you're cementing something that's curved, because it will want to not come back in. I did these little tiny details with E6000. It doesn't cure as fast, but this happened over several days, so I mapped out and cut out all the different panels and glued them on one by one. I try to do as many at once as I can, but at a certain point, when it takes more than a minute to apply the glue, you're cutting into your setup time. So the DRDs are like this mix of organic and technology. So these things, they're supposed to be like a potato bug, but a potato bug that the audience will identify with. So they've got snail eyes, because big eyes are cute. I cut and glued more panels.
Too much contact cement adhesive agent for me to bear. Oh, oh no! No! All my dreams. So this is now a paintbrush, and anything I put it down on is it's gonna be glued to. There's a mosquito buzzing around here. I swear to God, he's going in the glue. I have murdered so many insects. You would normally want to be a bit more careful in your application of glue. So this is salvageable. These things are super gross and grimy on the show. Everything is supposed to look like a wet insect kind of thing. They're potato bugs, but they're lovable. So any amount of dirt and stuff I think is only going to help.
So a little arm is supposed to come out of there, and it's got a tool on it, and it's sort of interchangeable. Like initially it's this claw, but sometimes they swap out the attachment. Using a rotary tool on your project is always terrifying, but it's going to be hidden by this piece right here. Oh yeah, look at that. These names scrolling by right now are my patrons. Thanks guys. You're the only reason this channel is staying afloat. Oh, specifically want to mention Daniel R, who increased his pledge to $5. So thanks Daniel. Now that I have the front of it done, I can move down the spine. I cut a hole for the circular panel, and I carved the eye stalk holes. It's the only piece I added. Hey, it's a bowling ball. I cut the claw out of offcuts from a Star Wars Inquisitor lightsaber toy that was built with EVA foam and crudely painted silver. They clearly didn't know about sealing. I cut and glued parts for the wrist of the claw. I used segments of paper clips cut with my side cutters as hinge pins for the claw. I used a wire hanger for the flexible skeleton of both the claw arm and the eyeball stalks. So I put that in there and covered it with tubes. That's how strong it is! I built up these random shapes for the half rim, and then did more detail panels, and cut the doors, and made the door frames. So this is all just gluing panels and sort of pseudo-organic shapes onto this thing. There's really not a lot new I can say about this. Let's go to the in-cam audio. It's like I'm getting a text.
Do you hear that? Only when I'm using contact cement do people try and call me. Text me. Get a hold of me. It's insane. Like, statistically speaking, most of the time I'm not using contact cement. It defies all laws of physics and nature.
And more panels. So I have a suspicion that each DRD had a different panel open up to sort of imply that they were all functional, but there's only so much space inside of that little thing.
Oh.
So like there's this one that can mount on a wall, and I'm pretty sure it's the only one that can mount on a wall because it doesn't move, but all the other panels open.
Oh, look at that. I love that. I love that. It's so perfect. God, foam is the best.
So when I first saw Farscape, the way I saw it was I caught the first episode, a few random ones from season 1, and then I just totally fell off my radar. And then the opening episode of season 4, which was essentially like going from this to this. And I was like, John, what happened? But yeah, if you don't know what I'm talking about, but don't want to watch a whole series, just watch episode 1 of season 4. You're not a sci-fi fan because it's basically just Die Hard in space, right down to the classical music turned action score. I cut holes in the foam, which should have been easier, but why don't we let past Jake take that one?
I really liberally applied the contact cement onto this, and it's created a layer of rubber that I'm trying to cut through with a knife that could be a little sharper, and the copper pipe, which really also could have been sharper as well, but my belt sander belt needs to be replaced again. Oh, and it's stuck in there.
I smoothed the interior with my rotary tool and then cut out the other openings now that I know where they are. Now that the hull is basically complete, I was finally able to cut up the interior.
For now, I'm just cutting access points.
Now for the eyes. So someone on Thingiverse is awesome and designed Farscape DRD eyes. The 3D print file link will be below. I almost used a mag light for this, but in the show, it's clearly something that an artist put a lot of thought into. He also has a lens print option, but I just used this sort of mushroom rivet shape industrial part. I don't trust glue for this, so I mixed up some resin and resigned them in place. That's not no, because resigned has a G in it. Jake, he doesn't know how to spell. Breathed in those fumes, shortened my lifespan by a few minutes. I widened the opening in the back, then I jammed an LED in there using a cut up coat hanger for the interior of the eyeball stalks. This will make them hosable. I threaded conduit over them and hooked in the lights. Time for some lighting tests.
Okay, so here we are in reduced studio lighting, doing a test of the eyes. The magnet in the hand was such a good idea. Not that I'm the first one to come up with magnets, it's just I would have been kidding myself if I thought that foam claw was going to hold anything. But yeah, he's my little helper.
I had the last of the details and filled in the mistakes with quick fill. Quick fill, quick seal. Always mix that up.
I put yellow dust on all the white filler areas and I let that dry, and now we're going to get rid of it. Having the added effect of cleaning up my workspace a bit.
It's gonna be powered by an old RC car, so I took off the casing of that. But before I did anything I couldn't undo, I made sure it would run with, the weight of the whole thing on it. And yep, I marked where the car was going to go and made sure it would have enough clearance around the wheels and cut it up. Then I glued it in. I put the circular hatch in. For the gack, I'm using wires, just regular old wires. So you could look at this as a lazy greebly, but I like to think of it like it's growing a replacement eye in case an existing one gets damaged. I mean, that's how I justify it. In reality, I don't think that they felt that the lighting would ever be good enough that people would notice. I painted a bunch of wooden sticks for the feet. The notion is that these things ran around on hundreds of tiny legs, but there are definitely a few shots where you can see wheels underneath, which I guess isn't bad over the course of like a show that ran 4 seasons. I stabbed these right into the foam, no glue required, and then proceeded to cut them down to a manageable size. So I tried putting yellow foam dust on the quick seal as it was drying, which I don't know, helped minutely, but not as much as I would have preferred. So I masked off, all the not yellow parts and sprayed it with this oranger looking yellow. The foam just absorbs it, but because it's already yellow, it's not really a problem in this case. And then I tore off the masking and that's it. The first DRD in my DRD army. Second is good too.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this, then you can hit like and subscribe and the bell icon to get notified when I upload, because honestly, it's a miracle if a YouTuber can keep a deadline. It seems like every build gets interrupted halfway through by some other job that actually pays the bills. Support me on Patreon.
Whee! He's so cute. He's like my kitty cat. Slow and stupid. We need one of him getting run over by a car.
Aww.
Why was I made to feel pain? Goodbye.